Start recording. Thank you. Again, good morning, pub members and members of the public joining us and city staff. We'll now call the meeting to order of the Portland Utility Board. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment period of the meeting and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that's targeted towards people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. So this means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. We put our principles into action by speaking up and speaking out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we will focus on the impacted individual or population. We'll condemn the conduct, but not the person. Amy will go over some meeting guidelines.
Thank you, Karen. My name is Amy Archer-Masters, and I'll run through the guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the hosts, which includes pub staff. So please limit any chat messages to technical and logistical issues, signing up for public comment, asking for assistance, or reminding us if you've been waiting to speak and haven't been called on. The raise function is primarily used by the board. The co-host may lower your hand once you begin speaking to maintain the flow of the conversation. During public comment periods, the public can raise their hand and you will be called on when appropriate. If connecting by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on for the board presenters and facilitators when speaking if desired. It's not required. Members of the public and others should leave videos off. Please mute your microphone when not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If using a phone, please press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. As mentioned, the public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with Eliza or myself, or raise your hand during the comment period to be added to the list. Public comment is also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. Back to you, Karen.
Thanks so much, Amy. So let's take a quick look at our agenda. We'll have our usual disclosure of communications and a public comment period. And then the bulk of our meeting today is going to be looking at our annual report and work plan. And certainly the intent is to finalize that work plan today. And then we have a few announcements, and we do want to make sure to preserve at least 5 minutes to go over what's going to happen at our next meeting on September 7th, which I believe is the day right after Labor Day. That's correct, yes. So are there any disclosure of communications that any board members need to tell us about? Teresa, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. This is Teresa, voting board member. I did speak to 3 of the Water Bureau staffs in the past, I believe, 2 weeks. Sarah Mezier, Jamie Cuddy, and Van, to kind of just get more idea of what they do and some of the common goals, including communication, how we can collaborate in communication for PUB, and also some equity, like common interests, and to learn about a new, I believe it's an initiative or advisory group that Van is starting called Multicultural Friends. which is not exactly related to pub, but I just wanted to bring it out. And also I have signed up to attend the Equity and Procurement Forum. And if any of the other pub members are interested in that session, I'm happy to do a report out after I attended as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Teresa. Any other disclosures of communications? Okay, thank you very much. Let's move ahead to our public comment period. We do have a public comment that we know about, and my understanding, pub staff have let me know that, I'm sorry, Eliza, did you have something?
I actually don't see the person who mentioned public comment. I don't think they've joined the meeting yet, so.
Oh, okay, righty. Okay, well, I guess we'll hold that then. Suppose we could come back to public comment after taking a look at our minutes. Why don't we do that? So, yes?
This is Eliza. I can handle, I'll just say this because I, in the process, you adopted your July 6th meeting minutes at your last meeting. And post doing that, I noticed I had one date wrong and I hadn't actually added the summary sentence at the top of the minutes. And so I made those changes. And so I'm putting in the record that I made those changes post the adoption of them.
All right. So noted, and we do not then have minutes to review or approve for today in that case. So let me just pause for a second because I kind of blew through that public comment period pretty quickly without asking if there's anyone else on the line who would like to make a public comment at this time. And Amy, Eliza, I'm not seeing any hands raised or any indication that there's anyone else that would like to make public comment at this time. Am I correct there?
Correct. I've not received comment from anybody.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, we had been under the impression that there was going to be public comment today. So we'll kind of we'll go ahead with our business and kind of play it a little bit by ear if a public commenter checks into the meeting a little bit later. All right. So let's get to work then on our annual report and work plan. I'm going to ask rather, Eliza to give us an overview of the purpose of the document and also what we want to make sure we get done today, what our goal is for the day. So Eliza, could you give us a quick overview there?
Yeah, I think I've shared it in writing in our read ahead as well, but the purpose is just to really give this high level overview of your operations and accomplishments and impacts in the previous fiscal year and do your work plan for the coming year. And we submitted to council as one document at the end of September. And as the co-chair shared the last time we discussed the work plan, that work plan is not carved in stone. It's a forecast for where you're going, and it's identifying your priorities. And so our goal for today is to just kind of walk through the document and discuss it, and hopefully formally vote to adopt the draft of the document with the agreed upon changes that you've maybe suggested during the meeting, and with pending any final formatting and minor wordsmithing and grammar checking and adding some photos. And I'm noting that at the end, if there's very few or minor changes are recommended, pub staff can finalize on our own. We're always happy to have a board member assist as another set of, as a board member pair of eyes, but we're also happy to do it on our own because we want to respect your time. If slightly more wordsmithing and changes are recommended, it's actually really useful to have a board member because then that board member helps us channel the energy of the board. And I received a very few additional comments at the very beginning of this week on the work plan piece. And so the version that we're going to look at today is just very slightly different than what I sent out last Thursday.
Okay. So then, thanks, Eliza. So Eliza is going to be then screen sharing, I believe, the document itself as we walk through it, and we'll be noting any changes or additions or clarifications that board members want to make at this time.
So I think what we'll do is sort of just walk through it. And I'm actually going to thank Amy ahead of time because she's being the master driver and kind of taking the pulse of where we're supposed to be in the document. And so we'll scroll to the beginning, which is the executive summary. And if there's any comments people have, just raise your hand. Karen's going to help be our key facilitator. So the executive summary is just, we try to keep it to less than a page. It's just, if you only have one thing to read, read this. This is what we did. This is what we're going to do. And then going past that, we have your introduction, and then we go straight into sort of your impacts, what your work that was done. So here's the list of issues that were addressed. And as the document says, it wasn't all your issues. It was just kind of the ones where you spent more time on. And I'm trying to document for history that there is a pandemic going on, and so it impacted your work in multiple ways. Accomplishments and impacts. I haven't yet heard back from BES whether I want to make sure that I've got right what Prashad was telling me, so I'll follow up and correct that one about which partnership she was really thinking of. Other than that, I'm going to keep scrolling. And then under the pub beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles, I want to actually let you all know that I'm going to leave it as it's worded here, which is relatively generic, but the board, the Parks Board and Parks staff were the one who asked if they could take a look, and they are borrowing and kind of implementing for their environment. So that's an impact, a positive impact citywide that you all had by developing those principles. And I was going to put Karen Spencer on the spot to see if she wanted to add anything about impact beyond the city to this sentence. I mean, to this paragraph.
Oh, certainly. I've shared the principles and values with the Oregon Youth Development Council, and they are planning to take a look at it. And of course, I've shared it with my network as widely as I can. I just don't have anybody else that I can confirm that they're going to take a look at it. But I think it's an excellent start, particularly given where we are in the pandemic. And Eliza, as you speak with folks, I'm happy to talk with them, and I'm sure anybody else on the board would be happy to talk with them as well, with other organizations.
Thank you for reminding me. When I talked to the Parks, my counterpart in Parks, I had actually said, I believe board members would be happy to talk to your board if they have interest. So I'm glad I guessed right. So, and then under the spur, that's a combination of stuff that was shared from the board itself, BES last year, because this kind of straddled the 2 fiscal years. So it's a combination of input from the board last year, BES last year, and then additional updates from Water Bureau this year. And Karen, since you were the board's representative on SPUR, I wanted to make sure that this paragraph felt accurate to you, and if there was anything you wanted to add.
It did, and I must admit I was looking at it late last night, so don't hold me to it, but I look pretty good to me. And I would say the other thing is maybe pubs continuing to advocate for additional spur funds, either at the local or state level, that there is need for that. I think that's something that we've done more recently.
Excellent.
And then I have just a general question on the order in which things are listed. I'm wondering if they should be in alphabetical order, or do we want to have them in a priority ranking of some sort?
It was meant to be alphabetic, and I realized that I didn't succeed because I changed the ambassadorship. I came up with a better name, a shorter name for that at the last
Okay.
minute. And so
Okay.
I'm open to others, but I thought, and I can actually add if people want that to be clear that this is an alphabetic list. I can add that at the beginning if that's
Yeah,
important.
I think that would help.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll re-alphabetize. I was literally struggling with how to get that short and sweet. And I didn't notice that I had lost my order when I renamed it. And I think there we go. That's the Tom.
Under, excuse me, under stipends, in the sentence that says in the fall of 2020, identifying stipends as a barrier, I think it would be, wouldn't it be identifying the lack of stipends as a barrier?
Yeah, good call. Good call.
Now, I have another question. So we're going over this now, and we're not going to get into too much detail. So are we going to have a few days or some time to be able to review this, and if we have anything, get back to you, Eliza? Or are we going to try and do it now? Are we trying to do it?
The actual goal, it's up to the board. My actual goal was to protect your meeting time since this has been in draft form for a little while now. So my actual hope was that you all would feel good enough about it that you would do what as we've done, like with the budget letter, sign off on the content and the tone, and leave like final formatting and grammar and minor wordsmithing. I think it would be very minor in this case because I consider the sentences largely decent. To pub staff and at most 1 or 2 board members if they were interested. But that's at the end. We'll see where we get and how people feel. Just because you have a lot of high priority items in the fall, and if you don't have to review this again, you don't have to. But you all can decide that you'd like it to come back for a brief review again. It looks like Amy might have found a typo in the title to increased transparency, it looks like, and highlighted that in red. And then if we keep going, the work plan frames, I want to make sure I got input after the very first time we reviewed this from several board members who had really sort of spoken the most towards those frames, but I do want to make sure that a chance that people have had a chance to review this final language and that it feels good enough or perfect enough if you want.
So Eliza, I have one kind of thought, and that is on the racial equity piece. A lot of it is what's written there is more external facing and not internal facing within the bureaus. And I know that a lot of that is discussed later under the priorities, but I'm wondering if there should be something in that section more directed towards and being mindful of any inequities within the bureaus themselves.
That is a good idea. Would it be as simple? I'm thinking on my feet, y'all. So if you see an exact way to do it, please chime in. But I'm wondering if it would be as simple as in where I say EG, or where this is actually Teresa put a lot of work into this, so I shouldn't say it was a jointly written sort of thing. And then other people actually added to it. So where it says EG policies around urban development, what if we said EG policies around urban development or workforce development? Is that enough of a reference?
I
Or
think
do you-
that's enough. Yeah, that's good.
And then does the climate crisis and climate justice look good? Almost all poorly worded things are the result of me, the scribe, but I also want to thank Alex for putting some time into thinking about how to say things better. Again, the errors are mine. I'm gonna use silence to mean it sounds good to people. You could also, if you want it,
So sorry, Liza, I was just one, maybe I'm just not understanding if you guys could just kind of explain to me this recognizing frontline communities contribute less to climate change. What are we considering frontline communities?
I can answer, or Alex, do you want to answer?
I mean, in general, I see that term as kind of a generalized term for environmental justice communities, which essentially means communities that are disproportionately impacted by kind of the intersection of all the different environmental issues that they're exposed to. I will agree that in this paragraph, it's not really defined all that well. I don't know if that's something that the board would like to define further or leave it more open-ended.
I think maybe just because if I was like reading this, just if we maybe can like, we could either parentheses, sort of an IE, environmental or whatever, just to kind of clarify who we're talking about. Because I mean, in my mind, frontline can mean a lot of different. So if we're being specific, I want us to be specific.
It looks like Robin and Teresa both have their hands up, and I don't know which of you.
I think Robin had her hand up first.
Yeah, this is Robin. I was going to say that frontline communities to me is communities that are heavily people of color and low income, which is the intersectionality that I believe Alex was talking about. But as someone who recently graduated with a degree specifically focusing on the climate crisis, it was always described to me that frontline communities was about race and was about economics.
Teresa.
Yeah, in this case, honestly, I would also just advocate just to use like communities sorry, I have a hard time saying that word, communities disproportionately impacted by climate change. Like I think that's how usually a lot of the government documents define frontline communities.
So we might say, I'm trying to channel what I'm hearing from everybody, and Julia is giving a thumbs up. Recognizing that communities who disproportionately experience the effects of climate change contribute less to climate change and all too often benefit less from climate adaptation policies. The board takes a climate justice approach to addressing the climate crisis. It looks like Kale has a question or a comment too.
Yeah, this is Kale, and I agree that the frontline community doesn't really clarify much. I think we should definitely be more specific. Even a suggestion that reads as recognizing marginalized communities contribute less to climate change, yet disproportionately experience the effects of it. Something along those lines that that has that is more specific.
So then I like that wording. So then it literally say recognizing marginalized communities disproportionately are disproportionately impacted by climate change, while contributing less to it, and something like that. And so that takes out the word frontline, and I'll just double check with Alex that works for you as well. I may have put that in there because I think it comes from the climate justice.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Alrighty, and so there's another place where frontline is out in there, and I will remove that as well. So we'll use marginalized communities there. And I'll make that sentence grammatically correct, which I can't do at the moment. Looks like Karen and Tom have, I think it's Karen and
I
Tom.
have a thought. I think it just because that sentence is going to get unwieldy, maybe it's just better to have a sentence defining what we mean by frontline communities and then using it in the sentence. I think it will really clarify the sentence and make sense to everybody.
Robin gives a thumbs up to that. Teresa gives a thumbs up. So now I feel like we might be converging on define frontline, then use it. And I'm going to make an ask because this has generated a lot of conversation. I'm going to ask that one of you that feels like you're sort of able to channel the intent of this conversation, just be a second pair of eyes for me as I'm writing this. And if somebody's willing to do that, is it who's offering?
This is Robin. I could do a little bit of research on it, and I was actually wondering if by chance frontline is actually already defined somewhere within the Bureau, where there's like a standard definition in some way that perhaps the city has actually already drawn from.
I think BPS does have one. So maybe we're not going to change the intent, and we're kind of just going to define it and then go with the wording, but I'll have Robin and I can do that. Does that work?
Well, I would like to see how it is defined, because their definition may not be what we would be imagining.
Okay, so that sounds good. So this sounds like a request to bring back to the board this section of the annual report. Sarah, then Tom, or I think it's Tom, then Sarah, sorry.
I just have a quick comment about, so this is Sarah Messier, Portland Water Bureau staff. So frontline in the Water Bureau has a different meaning of folks who work out in the field or are call reps. So I definitely support defining it as it pertains to this document, and not really looking at like how the, like, especially the Water Bureau, how we define it, because we use frontline staff in a very, very different way. That's not in the context of climate justice.
I am muted. Tom, do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about everything else that's in this report. And it strikes me that if we can write this in a way that we think about the person next door or the person down the street, in other words, writing it for the public, not writing it for city council so much or the bureaus, because I think we're trying to represent the public. And I think where we have new words that really cannot be that we can't use a more standard word, we have to use the new word, but trying to stay away from words that require a definition and things like that. something more simple, something that is, something that the average person on the street could pick up and say, oh, I get it. Okay, yeah. Because this is our report. So it should be straightforward that here's what we did. And maybe having information about recognizing marginalized communities. We've already said that above, I thought. We said something like that in our value statement or something. So anyway, it's striking me that it seems the more simple we can be, the more straightforward, the more person on the street reading this report, to me, seems to be something we should strive for.
And I saw Robin give a thumbs up to that idea, and then I saw Kale raise his hand.
Yeah, I agree with Tom to speak more about just how it affects, residents, Oregonians out in the communities, rather as opposed to using jargon. Because frontline, in my agency, we refer to them as our frontline staff that has that initial contact with service users. And I'm sure that in many other agencies, they have their own definitions. And so kind of avoiding that, I think adding verbiage that speaks to the people who contribute less to climate change, but experience more of the effects of it.
So then I think we're back, and I'm gonna ask for a quick show of hands if anybody doesn't like this idea. We're gonna take out the word frontline, and instead we're gonna use, as Kale had suggested a couple turns ago, just saying recognize that rewording that sentence. So we use the concept of marginalized communities, and we just say recognizing that marginalized communities contributed less, but experience the impacts more and are often benefit less from adaptations. We're going to do climate justice. And it sounds like if anybody doesn't like that approach, raise your hand. Otherwise, I think we've converged on consensus. Tom.
Well, above in the area where we talk about racial equity, we use the term BIPOC or BIPOC. Is that an acronym? Doesn't that fit, or an abbreviation, doesn't that fit here? Recognizing BIPOC communities are disproportionately impacted. So since we already introduced using that abbreviation, why don't we continue to use it? Is there a reason not to use it?
Well, I think it also references low income as well, which aren't necessarily exclusively, well, BIPOC.
Mm-hmm.
I got Kale. Yep, Kale, then Alex.
So I recommended the word marginalized because that encompasses a larger group of folks, whereas BIPOC is more, narrow category between Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So using the word marginalized because there are whites that are marginalized as well. There are, so it just captures more people. And people that are marginalized either by income, by social status, or whatever it may be, it captures more people. So that's why I suggested marginalize.
Alex.
I will second what Kale just said. That was all exactly what I would have said.
So we're now at consensus on that, because I'm seeing thumbs up from Tom, who raised the question, and thumbs up from somebody from Julia, and I'm not saying any thumbs down. So innovation and efficiency And I will actually, when I redo that, I will run it by Robin and Kale as just the channelers of the perfect wordsmithing for that section. So I've got you all down for that. Innovation and efficiency is, I tried to channel your comments, Kale, and also the feedback you gave me between meetings. I hope I got it right. It's short and sweet, but I think, and I also incorporated, Tom, you had wanted to make sure that we had a longer list of things that the board was looking at in terms of innovation and efficiency. And so I hope I've captured this one, short and sweet, good enough.
Yeah, I like it.
Should we use marginalized communities here as well? And at the last sentence, at the expense of BIPOC communities?
I think we should too. Thank you for seeing that.
All right, yay. It looks like we've got a thumbs up from Alex on that. If anybody feels differently, please unmute. Interagency and cross-sector collaboration. Again, this is a short and sweet that I think captures your interest in that. And then for your work plan priorities, what I did is, Sarah.
Yes. Before we move on from the lenses, so I've been still, wrapping my head around what ex officio member, means to this board and how I can best support all of your work. And so I know that, I'm here as a resource to give you all information about the questions that you have and about the Bureau in general. And I'm also here to help you all push the Bureau as well and ask these hard questions. And I really, really like these lenses, and just an idea that I wanted to put out to the full board is, if we want to, as a board, not necessarily today, but come up with 1 or 2 standard questions from each of these lenses that we give to each presenter. So if next time the, Portland Harbor folks come, they have our standard questions so that they need to answer about either, what's, how do you consider climate justice in your decision making? How are you promoting racial equity, both with the community and within your workforce? So I just want to put that idea out there so that we aren't making these lenses and they're stuck in this document, but we actually apply them and let staff and Bureau know that these are a priority, and we're going to be asking every single time you meet with us of how you're considering these lenses in your work.
Thank you for sharing that idea. I think it's a good one, keeping the document live, the work plan live, and actually applying it. So your work plan priorities are what we've done is, because there were some that were sort of more complicated than just the title and the table, and they were also both a little more complicated and high priority. It's probably hopefully clear that what you're doing is elaborating before the table on these high priority ones. And the transparency and process coordination one has not changed since I sent it to you. I think the last 2 versions, it hasn't changed at all. And neither has the financial assistance programs and billing. I want to call out for Karen Spencer, since you served on SPUR, if we can go back to the, sorry, Amy, yeah, that in the financial systems programs and billing, that's actually sort of I don't mean by collapsing, that's not the right word. It's synthesizing that set of concerns. And so it's saying you're concerned about residential customers, small businesses, renters in terms of financial assistance and billing issues. And so then hiring, retention, and promotion of BIPOC Staff?
Eliza, I just want to add, well, with Spur, there's also focus on women-owned businesses as well.
Do you want to add a call out? Are you recommending that we add a call out in the financial assistance programs and billing to small businesses, and then a comma of like including women and BIPOC owned small businesses, or are you making a recommendation to add to that?
I think it's fine as is. I just wanted to clarify that. I think you're okay, because I think that is, I think BIPOC community has traditionally been the focus of the board. And I would not want to advocate for broadening that because we have enough to tackle with
Got it.
addressing the BIPOC communities.
And we do have, and now I'm just remembering as the author who forgot what I wrote, at the end, we do actually mention that you're looking at inequities and disparate impacts, especially on BIPOC communities. Hiring, retention, promotion of BIPOC staff. It's changed. If we can pause there, that the order changed a little bit, and there was some additional emphasis added in that paragraph by folks earlier this week. So I want to give people a chance to read that and still feel like that feels good to people.
So one comment I have, which is a follow-up to what we talked about in our last session, is, I have a deep concern about the transition back to working in the office and the impact on BIPOC community members that has. So I'd like to see something in there on that.
Could that be added? We have, because someone else added some like cultural issues and decision-making structure issues in the bureaus. So the sentence that reads, the board will be closely examining how different kinds of work are valued and correlations between demographics within the field of work and its valuation, apprenticeship and internship programs. We could actually add workplace return. Why can't I think on my feet, you all? I'm sorry, but the return to workplace issues and their impact on BIPOC staff, and then workplace culture. And I've got a hand raised by Sarah, so I'll pause.
Yeah, this is Sarah again. Karen, I was just really appreciative that you brought up that comment during our last meeting. And I do work within my own small work group in water quality to shift workplace culture when it comes to anti-racism work. And I struggle with this section a lot because for me, I see, hiring and promotion are one set of this, and then, which have like actionable items, and then retention is just like this nebulous sort of thing of, I feel like it doesn't have really ownership of anyone. And is it the responsibility of the BIPOC staff to be retained? So I would love to continue having these conversations of like, what does like retention of BIPOC staff actually look like within a workplace culture? What are the actions there that we're expecting the bureaus to be doing? And not just management, but also, staff that are lower down on the hierarchy. Like it is, these are actions that need to be happening throughout the bureau. One note that I do have too about, returning to the workplace is that for like, at least for the Water Bureau, like our maintenance and construction crews, which have a lot of BIPOC staff, they've been working they've been reporting to work throughout the entire pandemic. So, and I know that there are complaints from those crews of like, well, I've never had the option to work from home or to work remotely. So I definitely want to, as we talk about returning to work and impacts on BIPOC staff, I just want to mention that there are a lot of BIPOC staff at the Bureau that have already been working through the pandemic and they're feeling left out and forgotten. So I just want to, hold both of those truths at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm missing something here, but in reading this sounds like it's all relative to the Bureau's employees and such. And I'm wondering, relative to the issues that you sent out, those questions and answers about the harbor that you sent us, Eliza, there was one in there where they answered a question about hiring and equity and stuff like that. And they gave the impression that depending on how the city goes about either paying its way out of something or actually staying with it and then hiring people, that they would lose their ability to control contracts. Is this section here including contracts, or do we have and I'm sorry for not knowing, but do we have another section that addresses contracting and assuring that the city's looking at equity issues related to contracts for engineering and construction services?
No. Yeah, yes and no. How's that? This hiring, retention, promotion of BIPOC staff is particular to employment. We do not, and maybe you want to add it to your work plan list. And I see Kaliska raising her hand, so I'm going to let her speak. But I'm guessing that we maybe should add procurement and contracting services with the equity lens as one of your high priority topics. Kaliska.
So I guess what I'm going to say is we need to remember that these are lenses, right? And that these lenses are applied to the aspects of Portland Water Bureau and BES, right? So I would think, like, by proxy of the fact that we're looking at equitable practices, that sort of just falls in there. I just don't want to sit here and specify all, like, too many things, right? Because, like, the lens doesn't have to be specific to every single aspect of it. I mean, if we want to mention it, we can. It's just, these are just sort of all encompassing, and it applies to everything that they present to us. If I hope that makes sense. So, and I wanted to kind of touch on what I think it was Sarah said about wanting to know more about the, I think just kind of BIPOC staff and what bureaus are expected to do. I think initially what I would really love to see is what efforts have they made and what steps are they looking at to make, and then we can give feedback on, have you considered this or have you considered that, to sort of inform that discussion is what I imagine. I just don't want to, like, I think a lot of times the burden of, like, well, how do we help you is put on the person themselves, right? Which I don't think is fair to continually ask the actual BIPOC staff, like, well, what do you want? What do we do to help you? Because then they're being burdened when an agency should be holistically either researching on how they make it better or talking amongst their leadership and brainstorming and coming and saying, hey, this is our plan. What do you think? So those are just my 2 cents.
If I could respond, I agree with you, except when I read this, it to open the door to looking at contracting outside the Bureau. So if there's one way, or even a word such as hiring, retention, and promotion, well, hiring, retention, promotion, contracting of, or something that for some reason it's in that response on the Portland Harbor questions that they said that they may not be able to do it in a contract. So I don't know how it came there versus, so I'm just, it just seems to me even one or two words somewhere, not making a big deal out of it, but contracting, the bureaus do a lot of contracting.
This is Eliza, and I have a proposal to step back because we're down in the deep level of the report, and I want to I think I see a and here. So I want to propose it and see how it sits with people. And that is to keep this paragraph focused on hiring, retention, and promotion of BIPOC staff as it's written. But if you'll notice in the table that shows up, if Amy, if you can scroll just a little bit, that shows up again, because what that paragraph is doing is spelling out that really high priority topic a little bit more. And so we could literally add a top priority topic on procurement and contracting focused on equity. And so we would just add a bullet point to your table as a priority. So that's the call out for it.
That sounds good to me.
How do other people feel about that? And I see Sarah has her hand up.
I agree with Eliza. These are two separate issues. And I don't want to, contracting and procurement is one group in the Bureau, and is very specific to that work. And I don't want to use equity for BIPOC folks as the umbrella, and that merges these two very, very important topics that need to be teased apart together. So I agree that they are both important and they both need to be separate.
I am muted. Sorry, you all. I keep muting myself and then I need to stay unmuted. And so I'm going to make oh, Karen has her hand up. I'll let Karen talk. Sorry, I didn't see that, Karen.
So I know that in the level 1 priorities that we have probably too many, and it's not that we don't think that they're not important, that they aren't truly kind of house on fire priorities, but we also recognize that we only have limited meeting time and limited bandwidth as community volunteers. So I am going to propose that we put procurement contracting as either level 2 or level 3.
How do Sarah gives a thumbs up? How do other people feel? Teresa has her hand up.
Yeah, I just want to second Karen, and I personally would suggest putting it in level 2.
Yeah, I feel like we just need more information of what work has already is on like happening. You know, I'm part of the Water Bureau and I don't even know. So I think that, you know, before we start like diving into like trying to shift things, like we just basically need more information of like, what is the thought process? What are the bureaus doing with this? And then we can decide like, oh, okay, there is opportunity for us to have impact and then bump it up. But right now, you know, I think we're just looking for a report out and more information.
Alex.
Yeah, I know that the level 1 priorities are a little overloaded at this point, but I would actually like to keep the procurement and contracting at level 1. And I say this because I know that there's some community work going on with respect to the Portland Harbor cleanup that will involve BES around procurement and community benefits agreements. And I know that that is something that at least a few community groups are pushing pretty hard right now. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm certainly flexible on that, but yeah, just want to add that.
If you hear a groan in the background, it's my dog. He's on antibiotics. That's why I was trying to put myself on mute. I feel like we could go level 1, we could go level 2 on that. And I think I'm not sure how you want to quickly make a decision, because it can move, it can bump up, because it will bump up when there's option for activity. So
why don't we do this? Why don't we hold off, and then, because our next task is going to be looking at the level 1s anyway, and then maybe make a decision then.
Great. And so I'm going to scroll us right back up real quick, because we jumped into this before I felt completed with this, the rewording of the hiring, retention, and promotion of BIPOC staff section. I want to have 2 people, like I did with the climate lens, if there's two people who feel like they can channel some energy to be eyes when I reward it, it's very limited. It's just, I'm going to send you an email. Can you raise your hand? And Karen is one, Karen Spencer. Is there anybody else who wants to be a second eye on this? Alex. Is there anybody who wanted to be a second eye and didn't raise their hand yet? Okay, I think we're good. So I'll get Karen, Spencer, and Alex on that. So work plan priorities. We have, if we scroll down now, we have a recommendation that we move filtration projects to level 2 as there's no foreseen decision points, i.e. points of input for the pub during this coming fiscal year.
Is that the Water Bureau's project, or is that, what are these filtration projects? Is that STEP and the Water Bureau stuff?
That's the Bull Run
That's-
filtration.
Bull Run, okay.
Bull Run. Mhm. I saw a bunch of thumbs up. And so, and Amy Chalmowitz has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to note something about the items that are listed in level 1, 2, 3, that they're at very different scales. So something like climate action and adaptation is very different, and at the scale is very different from like impacts of houselessness or what I guess Tom was recommending that we add contracting. So I'm not exactly sure how that plays out, but when I look at these and they're at those very different kinds of scales, it makes it a little harder for me to evaluate kind of what goes in level 1, what goes in level 2. So I don't know if there might be some lumping maybe that should happen, or maybe some splitting depending on if you're a lumper or a splitter. But anyway, I just wanted to note that the differences in scale.
I think it also depends on what we're looking at. So for instance, if we're looking at the Portland Harbor, as I just mentioned, those questions and answers that have come back, somehow the discussion about procurement was in the answer. So whether it's level 1 or level 2, if we are going to address the Portland Harbor and those questions and lead to some kind of recommendations, it seems that we would take the Portland Harbor and we would address number 1 and number 2 level issues in some kind of, if we're taking some kind of action. I guess to me, we would draw on a different level than number 1 as it relates to what is the issue that we're working on. So i.e. Portland Harbor or comprehensive rate study. If we're working on those issues, what other things do we want to address, even though they're a lower level? But since we're working on that and we may not get back to it, for instance, the rate study, when we make our recommendations, that may be the only chance we have to address whatever the level is of issues related to the rate study. So that seems to me the door is open. If we're working on something and I see something that's a level 3, I can bring it up and say, hey, as this relates to the rate study, what about this issue? Should we put it in here and address it? Or not? And I think that would, so this list of things would be a good resource as we're working on things. Anyway, that's the way I see it. So that, just throw that out there.
Kaliska has a hand up.
So I would kind of second what Tom just said. So just kind of holistically, I know that we have quite a few new members, that this, again, it's a dynamic document and this isn't like stuck in cement, right? So as issues come up with the bureaus and they present to us, these levels can shift. And like Tom said, we can either move things up, like, hey, you know what, Portland Harbor Superfund, they're talking about contracting, so we're going to talk about contracting. This list basically helps Karen Williams and I and Amy and Eliza when we talk to the leadership of the bureaus and like, hey, what is it you guys want to hear? These are the kind of things that we are asking them to present back to us, and say we talk about a subject and we realize, hey, you know what, this actually has a higher importance and impact for this project, so we're going to include this level 2 aspect of it. So I just want us to keep in mind that this is something that helps us inform the discussions, and again, that this is a fluid list. So I don't want us to think that these are sort of concrete. And then I wanted to just touch on the scaling. I don't, okay, how do I say this? The scale is sort of set, and Eliza, Amy, you can jump in, kind of by the scope of work that the bureaus are doing. So whatever program or capital funding or item that they're taking on as the bureau, the scale is sort of set in however much they're doing for that project, if that makes sense. So we don't, it gets very specific just to the bureaus is what and the projects that they have or programs. So that's where the sort of specificity of scale comes from.
This is Eliza, and I agree with everything everybody said, actually. And so I feel like I'm in a good place, but partly as your staff watching this work plan evolve over the past couple of years, I'll also add that I think also what's going on is it's getting more structure. And so then you're seeing the possibility of even structuring it more. So we're moving forward. And so that's also where what Kaliska shared makes a lot of sense to me about this. The scope of the topic is kind of set by what the Bureau's work is on that. And I agree with what Tom said, but I also recognize and agree with what Amy shared. And so I also, I see a lot of hands, so I'm going to pause, but and start calling on them. And I also want to make sure that we get to look at the operations section of this document a little bit. So I think it was Sarah, then Karen, then Amy Chomowitz.
Yeah, I had a thought about the sort of scoping and scaling comment from Amy, and I'm one of those people, or I like more structure and I like more putting things in buckets. So maybe, one thing that I'm seeing is that there's, an intermingling of established programs and like sort of initiatives is what I'm going to call it. So just want to pose it like, if we want to sort of further build structure into each of these, like maybe we could, categorize them into, existing programs versus, new initiatives or things that we're interested in, learning about and impacting that go beyond just like a small program or work group within each bureau. Which is what I did. I actually proposed pulling out like all of our board's work and putting that in its own separate category, because I saw that sort of sprinkled throughout our work plan as well. So we could just do the same thing for established programs and initiatives in this table.
Oh, I was muted. Karen Spencer, sorry.
Yeah, I like Sarah's idea of, but I think it may take a separate overhaul, which would be beyond the scope of the meeting. I had a couple of thoughts on just maybe on refining a couple of questions that pertain to level 1. And we split out apprenticeship and internship programs because we wanted that specifically presented last year. And we also wanted to have follow-up this year on that topic. I am wondering now whether we should just include it as far as the hiring, retention, and promotion bucket and make a specific call out. So in that right bullet point, put a comma after staff and including apprenticeship and internship programs, just to make sure that we don't lose track of it. And then the other question I have, and I'm maybe showing my ignorance here, it feels like the resiliency and emergency planning issues may be subsumed within climate action and adaptation strategies. And so I'm asking, is there something in there that would not be in the resiliency and emergency planning that would not be in climate action, or vice versa? And can we put those two together?
This is Sarah again from the Water Bureau. There are a number of things that in the resiliency and emergency planning that don't fit within climate, earthquake resiliency, water quality, emergency planning. There's a whole host of things. So I do appreciate your question, and I do think that there are, obviously resiliency and emergency planning that falls under climate action, but there are also other things that are not included in that.
I put apprenticeship and internship programs here. And I want to step through some of the, I think this is Eliza, I want to step through just some of the individual suggestions from PEM members. So we moved filtration projects to level 2 because it didn't sound like there's a decision point here. And those are the Water Bureau filtration projects. If anybody's opposed to that, raise your hand. We have a suggestion from a pub member to move Tryon Creek facility pub to level 3 if there's no influence no room to influence it. And again, I think going with what Kaliska's been emphasizing, these are largely this is not carved in stone. You'll bump it up if there becomes a case where there's a chance for input. You'll bump it right back up. And so, is anybody opposed to moving Tryon Creek facility to level 3? And then the same recommendation was made about urban flood and safety district. And anybody opposed to dropping that to level 3 for now?
Can you remind me, Eliza, what the issue or concern was for that?
With the urban flood and safety district, that is FEMA. That was the presentation that Michael Jordan gave along. There's a bunch of levee districts along the Columbia River when white settlers came here and did agriculture. They built levees to control the flooding, and they are not, FEMA said you have to work together differently than you were before. Otherwise your funding or contract with us, like I wish somebody from BES could say it, is going to be removed. And so they're in their early phases. There was some state legislation to build a levee, to form the Levee Ready consortium or group. And they're early, and BES is at the table. Amy's raising her, Chamowich is raising her hand. But that's what the topic was when we had our initial update. And again, the pub members' recommendation was move it to level 3 until and such time as we are able to have impact on it, like there's a decision point. So that's the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Really helpful.
Tom and then Amy.
Yeah, pertaining to that, as I recall, the presentation that Michael Jordan made also included information about the fact that I think the state or somebody determined that the method that they're using to charge property owners for the drainage services was a tax, and that they had to figure out something else or it was going to go under the tax caps. So I think that this is an example that if we put it down at number 3, when BES does its rate study, it may or may not look at this, but this could have an impact on BES rates as it pertains to drainage issues. And so anyway, that's the part that caught my attention, was the fact that their method of charging fees was considered a tax. And I'm kind of worried about the BES stormwater fee being vulnerable to that situation too. That's it.
Tomowicz, did you have a quick thing that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I agree with Tom that I think this could be put into level 3, and then as more information is generated, Ariel and I can keep tracking this issue. It is a big thing. It really is for the whole city. So we'll keep tracking it, and if we see, place where Pub may want to join in the discussion, get an update, or there's a decision point, we will let you know.
That I'm feeling like if there's any opposed to that, raise your hand. I'm going to also do the same thing. Lead and corrosion control was bumped down to level 3, suggested by a pub member because there didn't seem to be decision points coming up. And so if anybody in the board is opposed to that, you can raise your hand. They also suggested moving multilingual premium pay to level 3 for kind of that same reason. It's been piloted. You'll definitely want, the board cares about it, so you'll want there will be a written update and you'll want to see it, but unless there's a decision point for you, it would be just written. And the remaining open question, I felt like we didn't quite resolve. And again, I think there was some feeling that procurement and contracting should be level 1, and some feeling like it should be level 2. And I'm Robin, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say about the lead and corrosive control. I definitely, it feels comfortable to be in the level 2 or 3, but I do just want to reiterate, I've only been on this board for about 8 months now, and all of the public comment has been centered around lead. And so I would at least like to say that from the public side of this, lead has always been really a leading effort. And I know that if the community cares enough to come talk to us, that we should maybe focus on lead more than the Bureau itself. And I know that the Bureau has said that it's not necessarily within their control in a lot of the lead, as it's about pipes in older homes. But it's just such a common thing that I hear from the public comment section that it almost feels like we're ignoring the most prominent voices of the public by saying it's only a level 3.
Good comment. I think it was Alex and then Tom.
Yeah, I just wanted to, excuse me, second what Robin said. I would actually like to see it as a level 1 or level 2 item myself.
Hello, this is Karen Williams, your co-chair. I'm going to interject for just a moment, recognizing that there are still a couple of hands raised on this topic. I am doing a time check and putting a challenge to the board here. Again, our goal was to get this work plan in a place where we felt that we could vote on the tone, the content, and perhaps assign a couple people to work with Eliza and Amy on finalizing it. So I want to put that out there again, and also challenge us to still attain that goal in the next 5 minutes, if possible, and remind the board that we still need to do our public comment period, and that we do have some more substantial announcements than our usual 30-second version. And we do need to have at least 5 minutes at the end of today's meeting to talk about planning for the next meeting. So all that said, I challenge you all in the next 3 or 4 minutes, can we get to a place where we feel comfortable enough with this that we could take a vote on it? And carry on, Eliza, to address the hands raised.
I lost track if anybody lowered their hand and I didn't see it. I see Tom has a hand up.
Yes, regarding the lead and corrosion, I think it should be raised up, and I think we should actually put it on our agenda so that we can respond. I think Robin's comments are really, really right on. I think we should actually respond to the public with what we all think as a board about this subject. Do we support the Bureau? Do we support these comments from the public. I think we should look at the issue determination so that we can at least say, here's where we stand today based on what we know. Especially since so many people have, or 2 or 3 have brought it up over the course of the last 8 months since I've been on the board as well.
I saw a thumbs up from Robin. And so I'm gonna ask somebody on the floor to make a thumbs up from Karen Spencer. So do you want to move it to level 2? Somebody make a proposal to move it to what level you want to move it to.
This is Robin. I move that we push lead and corrosion control from level 3 to level 2.
Robin, you got cut off for me right where you said what level, unless everybody else heard it. I didn't hear it.
From level 3 to level 2.
Got it. Thank you. Anybody opposed? Raise your hand. And procurement and contracting. Someone make a proposal of where you want to move it.
I'd say leave it at 9.
It may be my internet connection. I can't hear you, Tom. It says you're speaking, but I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I said leave in level 2 is my recommendation.
Anybody opposed to leaving it at level 2? Okay, so, and then the work plan, as Sarah Messier did say, she suggested moving your specific work out to as a separate category at the bottom, which I've done. And I'm going to make a proposal because I think there were some really good conversations about the scoping and the recategorizing of the work plan. I think that actually connects deeply with how we're going to use the themes. And there was also some good comments on using the themes more actively. So my proposal for getting the work plan done is that we leave the work plan in the table as it is for this work plan, but we keep in the back of our head, how does it work this year? It's going to look different in our next report because we'll have improved on it during this year and implementing it. And so the proposal to repeat is to leave this largely structured as it is. And as we implement it this year, look at start making improvements, which will show up in the next year's annual report. If anybody's opposed to that, raise your hand. And if you like that idea, give me a thumbs up. I got 1 thumbs up. I got 2 thumbs up. I got 3 thumbs up. Good. I got a raised hand from Kale. Kale, I think that means you might be opposed, and so if so, I'd like to hear.
No, I don't. I don't oppose. I'm looking for the thumbs up program. So push the wrong button.
Yay! So I think we're gonna move. I've got a bunch of thumbs up and nobody opposed, and so we'll work on implementing improvements over the year. So I am gonna try to raise myself up to Karen Williams' challenge, and we'll try not to start speaking quickly to make it, but I'm gonna try. So the pub operations is a much more prosaic section of the annual report. What I did here is try to document the basics of your operations. To give thanks, you'll notice I'm giving thanks to your departing members. I also strategically tried to document where there were variances from the pandemic, due to the pandemic rather, where your operations shifted because of the pandemic. And that I also, if we scroll down a little more, I try also, even though it's just about your operations, to strategically mention certain things. So if we scroll even a little further, thanks, Amy. I'm going quick now. I mentioned in member experiences and interests that you are really questioning and rethinking that about what's required to serve on the board. In the recruitment, per input from a departing pub member, that in their experience compared to other city advisory boards, one of the ways that you maintain your independence is that you, the board, are actually playing a very lead and active role in making recruitment decisions. So that's documented as something unique about you all. excuse me, and if we scroll down a little further, this is all sort of documenting. We had a unique process this year. This was the first year the labor seat was open. Because of the pandemic, we ran 2 recruitments instead of 1. So I'm just documenting all that in the recruitment process. And if we keep scrolling, I'm scrolling the I'm documenting all that. I'm documenting your pub meetings. I think I'm going to hold off in talking about in your pub meetings, those of you who are very new haven't seen the email from me because I haven't sent it since this fiscal year, but I do try to get what's known as sort of output performance metrics, and that hasn't been working well because of the constraints of the pandemic. So I've brainstormed a new idea. I'll put it on hopefully on our September agenda to just run it by you. I did use the information that you all provided me in sort of developing this narrative, but I didn't have enough data points to do what I did in the previous year. And so I think I have an idea of how to address that for the future. Administrative review committee hearings. If we scroll up just a little bit further, I want to call out that I'm trying to call out here literally the unique role that the board members play in the administrative review committees, because you both have a committee perspective, but you do also understand the bureau operations. So you're sort of got that unique blended perspective that you bring to those committees. So and marketing your value, that's the value you're bringing. And then the parting pub members shared that they had felt very strongly, and that's the last sentence, that there's they identified a need for sort of an in-depth equity analysis of that process and who's being the demographic trends and who's accessing it and the decisions being made and et cetera. And then communications with council is also really quite pedestrian. It's just saying, here's the communications you had, and it's noting that your communications had a little bit of a lull during the pandemic in sort of respect of everybody's extra burdens, both the board, council, and bureau leadership, but that you're looking forward to re-engaging as we go into this next phase. And then I have the very exciting conclusion. And I hope that wasn't too quick, but if anybody has really quick comments on that, we can take it. Otherwise, I think we should pause and unfortunately have that discussion later.
So again, Karen Williams, co-chair, and at this point, I would like to take a quick straw poll and just ask, or rather ask for objections. If people would be opposed to us taking a vote on moving this work plan forward, again, with the qualification of final editing, wordsmithing, perhaps with the assistance of 1 or 2 board members. Is there anyone at this point who is uncomfortable with moving forward with a vote on the proposal? Excuse me, on the work plan? Okay. In that case, second question then is, are there 1 or 2 people who would be interested and willing to work with Eliza on making this document final? Robin, thank you. Okay, great. So with that, a motion would be in order, and I'm asking the board to do that, to approve the annual report and work plan with the understanding that Robin Castro would work with Eliza on final wordsmithing and again, carrying the intent of the discussions that we have just had forward and reflecting that in the work plan. Is there such a motion on the floor?
Oh, do you want me to? I make such a motion.
Thank you, Karen Spencer. Is there a second for that?
I'll second it. This is Tom.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tom. Is there any public comment on this motion that's on the floor? All right. Seeing no public comment, let's proceed to a vote. Karen Williams, co-chair and voting member, I vote yes.
Khalees Kadej, co-chair and voting member, I vote yes.
Kale Turn, voting member, I vote yes.
Tom Lipton, voting member, I vote yes.
Robin Castro, voting member, I vote yes.
Teresa Huang, voting member, I vote yes.
Alex Lopez, voting member, I vote yes.
Julia DeBra, also voting member, I vote yes.
Karen Spencer, voting member, I vote yes.
All right, thank you, everyone. Motion passes. Yay, good job. Good and great work. All right, so we're pretty pressed for time here, but we do have some business that still needs to be taken care of. So let us check again. And yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's Gabe. We'll put Director Solmer on.
Okay, so that's where you're suggesting we go next, Eliza. I was going to go to public comment.
You can. We didn't. Sure. Go ahead and make a quick request for public comment.
Okay. Thank you. We delayed our public comment period at the beginning of this meeting. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment at this time? All right, I am seeing nothing. So thank you then. So we have an announcement an update, excuse me, from Director Solmer.
Thank you so much. My name is Gabe Solmer. I'm the director of the Portland Water Bureau. Thanks for letting me give you my announcement, which I understand is between you and lunch, so I will be brief. We are in the process of hiring a customer service director. You have had briefings. I believe everyone on the board has had a briefing from Kathy Cook. She's leaving the city in December after 31 plus years of service. So this is a big change for the Bureau. It's actually the second leadership position that I've recruited for in my first year as director. The first was Jody Inman, who's our new chief engineer. And for the customer service director, we know that there are a number of issues that PUB has been invested in, things like collections and automated meter infrastructure, financial assistance, outreach to vulnerable customers. So we have heard that through our work with PUB and incorporated that into the recruitment. We've also built a really broad recruitment plan to cast as wide a net as we can for applicants, particularly non-traditional applicants. We've just closed the recruitment, so that was open for a month, and we received 37 applications. We're now in the process of screening those applications. We'll then do 2 rounds of interviews with a possible third with the commissioner and I, if that's needed. We're developing questions for those interviews, and so I would like to invite, if PUB has either topics or specific questions that you'd like to include in these interviews, we would certainly like to hear that. And I do want to be mindful that this is a public group and we don't want to privilege one candidate over another, but I'm sure between Eliza and Amy and the Bureau, we can figure out how to get that feedback. Just a note on our timeline, we are doing these interviews in September, probably into October, and then we're hopeful that our successful candidate would be starting in late October. So that's the timeline on the recruitment process.
And Director Solmer, may I ask, given that timeline, by when would you need to have suggested questions from PUB members to be able to use them in your interviews?
I don't believe that we will have interviews for the next 3 weeks. So we could certainly accept them during that time frame. I would suggest that if individuals have either topics that they would like to craft a question around, they might not have the exact wording, but just an area that they want to make sure is included, or specific questions, that they get that to either Eliza or Amy or both, and they can pass that on so that we can work that into those questions. I'd suggest that maybe come from on an individual basis. That will allow us not to have to have it as a pub direction, but the individual members, either voting or ex officio, could certainly provide that information to us, and that would be very valuable to us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that offer and clarification on timeline. So again, I'll just ask pub members, please respond with ideas, topical areas, or even particular questions for this recruitment to Amy and Eliza in the next couple weeks would be great.
And Chair Williams, the only other item I wanted just to mention, I will not go into any detail, but I just wanted to make sure that PUB had seen the news that the city's allocation of the American Rescue Plan dollars, the first tranche of funding, was made late last month. And the Water Bureau and BES have a proposal for $2.6 million as part of the $63.6 million. So we'll be coming to PUB to invite your participation as we create the program that we have for household assistance and utility bill assistance. But I just wanted to give that very sneak peek that we're just at the beginning of that process, and we're very excited to have PUB's involvement, much as PUB was involved in the SPUR program, small business program for utility relief last year. So more to come on that. Just wanted to let folks know, if you had seen that announcement from the city, that the utilities were included at the $2.6 million level. So very excited about what's to come.
Thank you so much, Director Solmer. That is super exciting. And thank you for drawing our attention to that. All right, we are over time, but I think we can not be too much more than 3 or 4 minutes over time, and we'll forego the rest of any announcements and just have a few minutes to talk about our next meeting, September 7th. Commissioner, so the items on the slide are on our agenda for that meeting. Commissioner Maps is going to visit with us, and we'll have tree program updates. And Eliza wanted to make sure that we did a quick poll to see if a quorum would be able to attend this meeting, noting that it is the day after Labor Day. So this is the Tuesday after Labor Day weekend. So if folks are comfortable sharing at this point that they know they would not be able to make it to that meeting. I see a raised hand from, I did see a raised hand from Teresa, but I was just going to ask if there's anyone at this point who knows that they will not be able to attend that meeting. It would be helpful for us to know. And I'm not seeing anything. Is there anything else, Eliza, you wanted to cover on the September 7th meeting?
No, thank you for asking. I just really want to make sure that people knew that Commissioner Maps would be there and plans to have the conversation with you all, and make sure that people were realizing it was right after Labor Day and would be able to attend. It looks like Robin has her hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, realizing that this is definitely a volunteer board, but we only have like 3 hours of official meeting time. And I've noticed that our work times tend to kind of go over a little bit, and maybe today is not the right time, but I was thinking it would be good for us from time to time to actually motion to extend our meetings by like an extra 15 minutes, because I feel like there sometimes I feel like we're so close to completing everything that we need to do, and just by being so limited by only like literally 3 hours per month, that it might be, if people are willing to, it might be good from time to time to extend our meetings by a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Robin. Appreciate that suggestion. It is indeed a balance, right? People's time and needs to get their lunch or get back to their jobs or whatever, but also, getting our business done, as you say, when we're really close. I think that's a great suggestion. So thank you. And great way to kind of pull the board to at the time to make sure everyone's okay with extending the meeting a few more minutes rather than what I've done, which is just sort of plow through and extend it by a little bit. But,
And yeah, Karen, sorry, my comment was not specifically about us going over 6 minutes. It was just like, hey, I want to have this conversation. And I feel like sometimes reminding that, like, the time checks, sometimes I feel like they almost cut us off in a way. And I know that it's not meant to. And so just knowing that we as board members have the ability to motion to extend the meeting and then have that agreed or disagreed upon, but just knowing that I feel like it is an option. It's just one that we haven't yet necessarily used yet.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you. Okay. Given that, on that note, as there is no more business before the board, I would call for a motion to adjourn. We
I
typically
happily
don't do that.
move.
I think it's
To
a good
adjourn.
idea to let the board adjourn itself.